The month of August will see the BRICS nations converge in South Africa for the latest series of meetings between heads of state of the BRICS nations. Now, in amongst the many of the discussions that they'll be having, a big question is energy and the way forward. South Africa has been experiencing load shedding. Are there lessons that can be learned from other BRICS nations that are dealing with the same questions, particularly when it comes to burning fossil fuels? Well, we're at the head office of the Mina Group and talking to the Managing Director, Vaslot Bayoglu, to tell us a little bit about how we should move forward and the kinds of conversations that we should be having. Vaslot, thanks very much indeed for joining us. When we look at the energy story in South Africa, we hear words like energy mix as citizens, and we often get a sense that there's a battle going on between fossil fuels, nuclear and coal and renewables. I just wonder, is that the lay of the land, that you've got these three major sources battling for space?
So, Peter, we have limited options actually to generate baseload, but I think it's important for me to explain to you and the viewers about the difference between baseload and the intermittent power. So, baseload is generated 24 hours a day, which can be out of coal, it can be out of gas, it can be out of diesel, fuel oil, it can be out of nuclear. So these are the sources that can give us power for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Okay. And then you got solar, wind, hydro, or biomass. These are the sources that are classified as renewables. Biomass is very limited, but it can also generate like 24 hours a day power, so that can be actually part of baseload. But when it comes to solar and wind, it is weather related, so it can be. It is intermittent. It's variable, and then hydro is also variable. When the water levels are down, then you don't have the necessary power. So in the case of South Africa, we have coal and nuclear as base load, but 70% of our power comes from coal, and it was more in the past. And one of the reasons why we are actually getting load shedding is because of not availability of the coal-fired power stations. So our base load is generated from coal, whether we like it or not. And what government is trying to do with their plan, integrated plan, is they want to diversify this power source, and they want to get gas involved, and they want to get more wind and solar. So, which is the right thing to do. Wind and solar are complementary, but the reality is our base load needs to be generated by coal or nuclear.
So the additions to our traditional mix are a good thing. It's just how we do it and at the pace that we can do it. I just wonder, and we spoke a little bit before we started this conversation on camera, are we looking at this problem the right way? Part of solving an issue is looking at it in a certain way so that you can make the right decisions right at the beginning. You get to an accident site, somebody's bleeding, has got a broken leg. You stop the bleeding first and then address the broken leg. I wonder if we're doing the right things with the energy story.
I think in the beginning we were not looking at it as a country to solve the problem in the right way, in the right pace. But I think in the last, say, 12 months, it's completely changed. I think government realizes that we cannot stop burning coal. We have to carry on with the coal-fired power capacity, and then we need to look at like if we can upgrade the transmission lines or put new transmission lines to bring the power that's generated by solar and wind to Gauteng, to take it to Cape Town, or to take it to Durban. So I think current diagnosis is right. Government realized that we've got a base load issue. We don't have a just transition issue, because when you talk about just transition and you talk about stage 8 load shedding, it's unjust for the whole nation, not only for business. It's also unjust for poor people as well, because they start losing their jobs. I mean, if you don't give power to service industry, to restaurants, they can't operate there. So people start losing their jobs. Instead of creating more jobs, that's what we need, we start actually job shedding because of the load shedding. So I think current approach by Minister of Electricity, by Minister of Mineral Resource and Energy and Minister of Public Enterprises is the right approach, and including Minister of Environmental Affairs. I think she understands the value of every megawatt power that we need in South Africa, because we need to create jobs. Without power, and without actually power at the right rate, because we can't afford to pay like 5 rand a kilowatt hour. That was done in the past for these window bids for solar and wind. So we need cheap and we need reliable power. That's what we need. And I think diagnosis is right, and I think they're in the right direction at the moment.
So the idea is to say, this is what we have, let's first fix it. Once it's working, got our base load right, then we can start to add the things that we can do in terms of diversification. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. Like our problem is base load. We need to have enough capacity to produce the base load, and then solar and wind will come and bring the average price down during the hours that they provide power to the grid.
So what do you tell the climatologists who'll say, listen, Vaslet, I hear you, but there's not going to be a planet if we don't stop what you're doing?
Look, I am not denying the global warming. Okay, there's global warming, and there are facts of South Africa, and every country has its own facts. So, for instance, can you go and tell Saudi Arabian government to stop extracting oil? Because that's the biggest polluter, right, in the world. They produce like 10 million barrels a day. Can you ask them to stop that? No. But then, why do they come and tell us to stop producing coal? I mean, China is producing half of the world's coal, burning it, like 4 billion tons a year. And the world's solar panels, 80% of the world's solar panels are produced by China by using coal-fired power energy. So it's a vicious circle. It's not that easy when you talk about, like, we're going to decarbonize. How are you decarbonizing? How is South Africa going to solve the energy security issue? We need power in this country. How do we get power? We don't have oil. We don't have gas. Nuclear is very expensive. So the only way to produce power for South Africa is coal-fired power capacity that needs to be used efficiently, and maybe added more into the system, like talking about like gas, for instance, bringing maybe on LNGs or and on the LNG vessels, and then burning it in gas-fired power stations. So these are the options that we have, and we are limited with those options. So we can't just go and think about this fantasy land. We're going to produce power in Northern Cape with solar, and then in Eastern Cape and Western Cape with wind, and we're going to invest 400 billion rand. Where is that money going to come from? Is somebody going to donate us that money? No. They want us to do that, but they want to give us loan. What would that mean? How long will it take to pay that loan back? Would that work? Is there a country in the world that generates the power from renewable energy and power the whole nation? South Africa is an industrialized country. We've got smelters, we've got platinum smelters, gold smelters, ferrochrome, ferromanganese smelters. How do you run these assets? You can't run these assets with solar and wind, with the variability that they bring. So the reality is we need base load power until such time humanity finds a way to store energy in an efficient way, in a cheap way. Because currently, storing energy is also not cheap. It's very expensive to store energy. So, bottom line is, unfortunately, I can't give you good news about the global warming part of the thing. But we have to burn coal in South Africa to make a living in this country, to make a living for 50 million people of this country.
All right. So if we accept that our baseload story means that we've got to keep on burning coal, is there such a thing as getting cleaner coal?
Yes, there is. South African power stations need investment on the clean coal technologies, so that the bad gases that gets out of the chimney, NOxes or SOxes, all those gases can be captured. So if you look at the new coal-fired power stations that's built in China, they come with clean coal technologies. Okay, so it is doable, but government from the beginning didn't look at from that perspective, because when the last CEO who left the country and has become a Yale lecturer now, all of a sudden, he actually said, no, we're going to go to renewable energy. And government didn't question him in the beginning until such time they realized that this is not working, because before Andre de Ruyter left, we were talking about stage 8 and grid collapse. What happened to that? The grid didn't collapse, and we are now in stage 2, stage 3 maximum. We're not on stage 8 anymore, because the focus now is to make sure that the coal-fired power capacity is giving us power. We're not talking about EAF per power station. So, for instance, closing Komati power station, which is 1,000 megawatt, and then putting 100 megawatt solar panels there is a mistake. And we should not do that for Arnott, for Hendrina, for Camden, for Grootslev power stations. We need to make sure that these power stations run and give us power.
Okay, so if there are cleaner technologies, should we be investing in cleaner coal technologies rather than using the money, as you were saying, in solar panels and things like that? Are we saying upgrade what we have is going to be more beneficial than trying to explore new technology?
I think we need to find a balance. I think renewable energy is necessary because it's complementary. But the first thing first, which is we need to deal with the existing coal-fired power fleet, which is old. It needs to be refurbished in certain power stations. It needs to be fixed in certain power stations like Kusile, because there were some design mistakes. But then all of them should have clean coal technologies to make sure that we minimize our impact to the environment. Then on top of that, like if there are investors who are prepared to put money into solar and wind, including the transmission, because at the end of the day, without the transmission lines, those capacities that are created by solar and wind do not mean much, because we need to bring the power to the areas where we spend the power.
Does that mean that entrepreneurs like you open more and more coal mines, or are we saying that we've got to a point where we've got what we've got, let's make that efficient, and we're not going to mine more coal? Or how do you see it?
Okay. Coal mining industry is critical for South Africa because we employ about 90,000 people as coal mining industry in South Africa. This is outside Eskom, and this is outside all the side industries that are supplying us services. So it's massive economy especially for Mpumalanga. So we can't actually give up that industry. Like we as company, we invest in coal mining because we think there is a market, because it's not only South African market, it's also market in India, market in Pakistan, market in Taiwan, Thailand, South Korea, especially Asian countries. There's a massive market. And when Russia-Ukraine crisis hit, it was Europe. When European companies were not allowed to buy from Russia, then they came to South Africa, they went to Colombia, they went to Australia to buy coal. So there's a massive market in the world, and coal burning is actually increasing. It's not decreasing. It will decrease at some point when all these decarbonization efforts came to fruition, but currently there's a massive market for coal. And in the case of South Africa, and in the world actually, majors are out of coal mining. Anglo-American, Rio Tinto, BHP Billiton almost out, except Glencore. All of them are out. So who is going to build new coal mines? So if Eskom needs more coal, for instance, we don't supply coal to Eskom, but there are a lot of companies that are supplying coal to Eskom. They're buying about 100 to 120 million ton a year. Where is Eskom going to buy their coal? We need actually mines to be built to replace the ones that are depleting, and because that's how we're going to keep the jobs safe. And because the need is there, the need in China, the need in Asia, the need in Africa, in East Africa, in West Africa, for coal-fired power stations. The need is there. It needs coal mines, and that's why we see the market, and then we invest in developing coal mines.
The electricity minister talked about the energy action plan, and they said a year on, we're about 56% of the way. How do you see the current trajectory in terms of working that plan? You were saying that they've diagnosed it properly. How do you see the way forward? When are we going to get to a point where you feel confident that baseload is secure?
Look, first of all, I think his efforts are very promising, and I think President's support is quite important, and he is supporting the Minister of Electricity. And again, Minister of Mineral Resource and Energy and Minister of Public Enterprises, I think they do what they need to do. So there is a collaborative work now to deal with this issue, and we are seeing the results, even in the short run. But I think next year by this time, we will improve. I think there will still be load shedding. It won't disappear because these things take time to fix. But what he does, for instance, Minister Ramakgopa, he goes out and tries to buy power from Mozambique. He's trying to get every megawatt that can get into the system. He visits the power stations. He wants to make sure that we don't waste time anymore. Because we got coal-fired power fleet, and we can use and benefit from that until such time we create extra capacity, be it from gas, be it from nuclear, be it from coal again, or be it from battery storage and renewable energy sources. But until such time, he is very realistic. He knows that we have to run these assets to generate power. So again, I'm repeating myself, by this time next year, I'm hoping that energy availability will be improved if the efforts of government somehow sabotage or somehow don't carry on happening. Again, because we can't afford to have another renewable energy euphoria and then say, no, we will solve this problem, we'll invest in transmission lines and we'll solve the problem, and just transition is going to work. Just transition is only going to work if you have base load. And our base load is definitely coal.
When I think about the BRICS nations, different sizes, but a lot of similarities in some ways, and I just wonder what South Africa can learn about how countries like China have managed their energy question.
Okay, Peter, the thing is, obviously South Africa is a smaller economy compared to Brazil, China and India, but like you said rightfully, there are a lot of similarities because these are all developing economies. And in terms of energy needs, Brazil is the cleanest because they've got massive hydro capacity, and they're doing very well in terms of that. But when you look at India, China and South Africa, these are all relying on coal, and China's rise in terms of being a king in manufacturing in the world relies on coal because they invested heavily on coal. They generated cheap power, and they manufactured cheap goods, and they became actually the price maker when it comes to a lot of goods that goes to Europe and that goes to the United States. So India is following the same steps. Yeah, they're investing in renewable energy as well, both countries, but the reality is the backbone of their power generation is reliant on coal. So South Africa is a bit like we had some glitches on the road to just transition, but currently I think, like I said earlier, we have found the right tempo. We need to fix our existing power infrastructure, and then we will get wind and solar as a complementary source.
All right. Perhaps in conclusion, I mean, you're a coal miner, so people are going to think you're going to punt coal, but perhaps just give us a rationale that we as citizens can sit with when we're wading through all the news and all the conversations that are taking place. Why we need to make sure that our base load remains secure using coal instead of trying to explore the other ones at a faster rate.
Okay, so again, we have certain options for base load. Coal is the cheapest option. Gas is slightly more expensive, but we don't have gas in South Africa. Nuclear is the most expensive out of baseload options, and we don't necessarily need to invest in nuclear because it comes with its own challenges, like what do you do with the waste, nuclear waste kind of things. So coal is the most practical option for us because it's abundant in this country. We've got coal for the next 100 years, easily to mine, open cast, very good quality, and as long as we implement clean coal technologies, that's the cheapest option. And the other thing I think which is important for your viewers to know is, we talk about like wind and solar that's going to create jobs. Wind and solar don't create jobs in South Africa. Wind and solar create jobs in China, in UK, in Denmark, in Spain, but not in South Africa. Coal-fired capacity generates jobs in South Africa, and that's what we need because we need a sustainable business environment. We need sustainable jobs so that we don't have issues like we saw 2 years ago when it happened in KwaZulu-Natal. And those people who were part of the looting was people who were jobless. If you provide jobs people at the decent salaries, why would people go and loot? They won't. So we should look at not creating a social chaos in this country by cutting the jobs further, by stopping coal-fired power stations, by stopping coal mines. So that's critical for South African social justice.
So the key word is baseload.
Right.
Faisal, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.